All right, here we go, doing the thing. Oh, thanks, Texas. This is just gonna make me mad again. Sorry. Croeso friends, welcome back to Opus Elenae. It's been a month. I know the title of this video is a little clickbaity, and in some ways it's a little tongue-in-cheek hyperbole kind of thing, but in other ways, it's really not. I wanted to explain what happened, why it affected Texas so much, and how my historical recreation kind of saved us. So I live in Texas, where it rarely dips below freezing, and usually only for a day or two here and there in winter. Well, a couple of weeks ago, we had a pretty major winter event. Normally, cold polar air is sort of confined to the North Pole by the jet stream, but climate change has gradually weakened the jet stream, meaning that it doesn't stay in as nice and tight of a band up north, but starts to meander farther and farther south, resulting in what we've been calling polar vortices. So that's kind of a really long, vaguely scientific way of saying that when Texas and most of the rest of the continental US was hit by 2 consecutive winter storms, we experienced several days of the lowest temperatures on record since 1899. Not to mention ice, several inches of snow, and more ice. More than 170 million Americans are under some kind of winter storm alert. So why was Texas hit so much harder than anywhere else? I mean, we weren't. Let me explain. In the 1930s, when electricity was starting to be a thing on a very wide and accessible to the rural public scale, Texas decided to implement a power grid that didn't cross state borders to keep federal regulations out of the sale of Texas power. So that's how we get this image, which shows the 3 major electric grids in the US: the Western Interconnect, the Eastern Interconnect, and Texas. The intrastate nature of the Texas power grid also means that companies that provide power within it don't have to conform to federal standards and recommendations for things like winterization of power plants, equipment, and energy lines. So what happened during this unprecedented winter storm? Due to the lack of implementation of winterizing measures, windmills, nuclear plants, coal, and natural gas plants froze and shut down. And I've seen a lot of posts on social media from conservatives pointing at the frozen clean energy generation methods as if it's some kind of gotcha, like windmills are useless and to blame for the entire thing. And the thing is, similar energy generation methods are used successfully in places such as Sweden, the Netherlands, Denmark, and Antarctica. So when properly winterized, they're fine. So that means there was much less electricity, 45,000 watts less than usual available. So the Electrical Reliability Council of Texas, or ERCOT, initiated rolling blackouts in order to try to spread the energy shortage around the state, ensuring that nobody would get too cold. It's worth noting here that in the larger Eastern and Western exchanges, when there is a localized energy shortage, electricity can be piped in from elsewhere. The isolated nature of the Texas exchange means that there was nowhere to get any electricity from other areas of the country. Can you guess what happened next? Yes, you're right, the rolling blackouts didn't roll. ERCOT had to shed so much electricity load that the only circuits left on were the ones that had hospitals, fire stations, and other critical services on them. There just weren't any other lights they could turn off in order to turn others on. Now would be a good time to briefly address warm weather construction, because I think it's something that people from more northerly climes don't always realize when thinking about why sub-zero temperatures are so dangerous here. Firstly, our homes are oriented differently, east to west, to minimize the amount of high sun our buildings get, as opposed to cooler climate houses that are generally north-south oriented in order to take advantage of high sun to help heat homes during the day. Secondly, many of our roofs are designed to reflect heat rather than absorb it, so even the lesser amount of high sun a house gets is less efficiently absorbed. Thirdly, the amount of insulation needed to maintain a 30-degree temperature difference say cooling a house from 100 degrees to 70 degrees is much less than to maintain a 60-degree temperature difference heating a house from 10 degrees to 70 degrees. And finally, our pipes and wires are not buried as deeply or insulated as efficiently here, so they are more vulnerable to freezing and breaking, even with the precaution of dripping faucets, than they are in the north. This is about to become extremely relevant. So now we have a huge chunk of the state's population, over 5 million people, stuck at home because we don't have the infrastructure to deal with ice and snow on the roads. So venturing out of your driveway, assuming you even can, is extremely dangerous. In the dark, with houses designed to shed heat, not trap it, and pipes that are slowly freezing. And it's not just domestic private pipes. Without electricity, you know what else starts to fail? Water processing and purification plants. With no way to pump water effectively, did I mention that generators were also freezing too? The pressure in the water main started to drop, allowing bacteria and other contaminants to enter the water supply. A boil water order was issued for many cities as local water treatment plants failed. A boil water issue to just about all of the citizens of Texas who, like me, have electric stoves and no power. In fact, the mains pressure dropped so spectacularly that in many areas, the water demand was 2.5 times the amount that plants were able to deliver. And water service was disrupted at best or completely non-operational at worst for 12 million Texans. Texas was hit by Winter Storm Shirley on February 10th and Winter Storm Uri on February 13th. On February 18th, Governor Abbott issued a disaster declaration for all 254 counties in Texas. Many would not see reliable electricity restored until Sunday, February 21st, and there are still people as of this writing on March 3rd who do not yet have water. Please stay tuned after this brief commercial break. So now that we have the stage set, what do I mean when I say that medieval reenactment saved my life? First of all, let me say that we were incredibly lucky. We never lost our water supply, our water heater is gas and remained working, so we had access to hot water the whole time. And we did get a few times where the power came back on long enough to heat up my very tiny apartment. And if none of these things had happened, if we had needed to evacuate, we did have a safe place to go less than 3 miles away with power and water and warmth. But the things that I have and the things that I learned because I do medieval reenactment meant that we were able to stay warmer and safer and more comfortable. The first thing I did when the storm started was to hang blankets over my windows and doors. I can't add more insulation to the walls or reorient the building to be on an axis that will allow it to take advantage of the afternoon sun. But I can follow the example of medieval castle dwellers who used tapestries and other wall hangings to provide a layer of interior insulation and to block drafts from windows. The second thing I did was to make 2 big pots of soup while I still had electricity. I love soup. My friend Sly actually named a soup recipe after me. Link in the cards to a video where you can watch our other friend Oz cook it, but didn't actually cook because I didn't have the ingredients. But soup or pottage is a staple of the medieval peasant diet. It's generally simple to make and easy to reheat, which is incredibly important in this situation because I don't actually have a camp stove. I've never needed one. My apartment is like 10 square feet, and when I camp, it's usually with my partner who has a nice big house in which to store all of the equipment we will need. In Houston, 2.5 hours away. He's fine, by the way. He was fine the whole way through. So I improvised. Okay, so here is my setup. I've got a half pan size baking sheet here to make sure that everything is contained and easily transportable. And then I've got, I don't know, like 2 little flowers is how I always think of them. 2 little flowers of tea light candles, one on each side of the sheet. And then I have these wee teacups here. See if I can, there we go. These little teacups here that were part of a set, and I've just turned them upside down and in the corners and put a cookie rack, like a cookie cooling rack on top of them. And then I can put like my little kettle of water on over one of them like that. to heat up on one of these kind of improvised burners, or a pot of soup or food to heat on the other, whether that's soup or oatmeal or more soup. It actually works surprisingly well if slowly. The water will boil if I leave it long enough, which is nice. We can actually have hot tea to stay warm. I don't know if I want to actually cook a meal over this setup. It would take forever, and I would be kind of worried that things didn't cook all the way through fully, but it's totally working for reheating cooked foods. Oh, and I have this brazier here that I got in a Yankee swap at an event once, actually. So it's really good for keeping things hot, even with only one tea light in there. So once I heat water up, I can make a pot of tea and put it on there to keep warm and not have to like worry about making a new cup every time. So here we go. It seems kind of, I don't know, like desperate or something, but it does exactly what I need it to do, and hot food is going a long way towards keeping us warm and content. And thank goodness I brought approximately 5,000 tea lights on my last trip to IKEA, right? Like, good job me. The last and honestly most important way that medieval reenactment helped me function was the clothes. Beginning in the late medieval period up until the industrial age, the world was going through what's called the Little Ice Age. Polar pack ice grew, warm summers became unreliable, and crops failed because of the curtailing or absence of a warm growing season. While I'm not saying that this storm was anything quite like that level of ongoing catastrophe, I will say that pre-modern people knew how to dress adequately for inhospitable weather. And because there are enough events where I spend a significant amount of time outside in winter, which even in Texas normally gets quite chilly, I did have adequate clothing for both myself and Tornado to stay warm and comfortable in an apartment that dropped to between 40 and 45 degrees at its coldest. I ended up wearing most of the clothing I wore the first time it snowed, and I went outside in it for an overly aesthetic photo shoot. And then some. So from the skin out, a long sleeve linen shift, I have several, I change them out every morning, a pair of modern leggings, merino cashmere knee socks, and a pair of hand knitted wool socks over those, a washed silk dress, and my gray wool dress over that. To keep my head and neck warm, I layered on one of my wool London hoods and finished everything off with a pair of knitted wool fingerless gloves. I was actually incredibly pleasantly warm. I could have put my wool cloak on too, but I didn't even need it. Those layers were a perfect balance between maintaining warmth and having the ability to move around and actually work. Tornado mostly stayed in bed since that was the warmest place in the house. We layered all of the blankets, including one wool army blanket that I use as a rectangular cloak, on the bed. I think there were 6 or 7 on there at one point, and to make sure that our extremities stayed nice and toasty, I filled mason jars with heated water, wrapped them in towels, and put them in the bottom of the bed to warm our toesies. In between tending the fire and frantically taking advantage of the brief windows of electricity to cook more soup and charge up mobile devices, I also took comfort in being able to have things to do that didn't rely on a screen or a power source. I sewed and spun a bit and admittedly listened to an audiobook on my phone. Look, it uses less battery than watching videos, and I don't have a skald living with me to amuse me with saga recitations whilst I embroider. And on Sunday, the power came back on. We were okay. And I owe a lot of that okayness to my experience and skills that I gained or refined while doing historical recreation. And it's not just me. Several of my reenactor friends reported similar experiences to my own. They cooked over camping stoves and in wood fire pits in the backyard. They wore clothing handmade from warm wool and hats, socks, and mittens made from fiber that they had spun themselves. They spent long days without electricity, making lace and music. They bundled themselves and loved ones in camping blankets and sleeping bags. They drank home-brewed beer and mead to save potable water. Okay, I'm not sure if that one is entirely beneficial, but I'm sure it was way more fun than melting snow. Climate change and climate crisis are not going away anytime soon, not without drastic policy changes that I am not confident that the current elected officials are willing to make. Drastic weather events are going to become more and more common going forward, and the fact that a certain kind of disaster hasn't happened in your area before is not a guarantee that it won't. While it's true that this sort of weather is unprecedented in Texas history, just kidding, this same thing happened back in 2011, and ERCOT was warned that its failure to winterize its plants and infrastructure would result in exactly what happened 2 weeks ago. Look, I'm not the kind of person that you would picture being a prepper. You know, the kind with the yellow snake flags and the military cosplay? The kind who, incidentally, were some of the least prepared for this kind of emergency situation. Jean-Michel Conrad has a hilarious thread on his Twitter recounting his older brother's survivalist fail. I will link to it in the description below. Please go read it. Despite not living in nearly enough space to do an actual prepper pantry and have enough food and supplies to live on for a year or whatever, I've thought a little bit about things that I'm going to do and buy just in case something like this happens again in the future. I've already purchased a single burner camping stove that will run on butane or propane, so I won't have to be so frantic about not being able to cook when there is no electricity. And it will be useful when we go on camping trips as well, so that's a nice bonus. I've already bought a couple of silicone hot water bottles. The mason jars wrapped in towels were actually brilliant as bed warming pans, but were a little awkward to try and cuddle with, so now we have the option for both. As far as future plans, gathering a hurricane kit is on my to-do list. If you live in Florida or anywhere on the Gulf Coast, you know what I mean. It's basically a backpack full of emergency necessities like flashlights, notarized copies of important documents, a radio, emergency candles, hard drive backups, a first aid kit, solar charges, that kind of thing. I will be continuing to stock my freezer and pantry with foods that I can use to feed us through a short-term crisis, even if I don't have space to store months and months of supplies. I will also continue to build a modular cold weather medieval wardrobe, including some wool chassis and mittens, so I have some more historically adequate options. That whole process will be documented here on the channel, don't you worry. In fact, my next video will be making a woolen buttoned medieval hood, so it'll be on theme. I wanted to take a moment and thank everyone out there who checked in on us during the storm, and everyone who was so kind and so supportive about this video being late because of my self-care and processing needs. I really cherish each and every one of my wonderful croissants. Seriously, you are the best audience, and I love you all. I was gonna say enjoyed, but that might be too strong a word. If you appreciated this video, like and subscribe for content that isn't really like this at all mostly, but is still interesting. Maybe consider watching another of my videos too if you want to check them out. I upload every other Friday, except this week, and if you like reminders, ring the notification bell. If you want to find me on other platforms, I am at Opus LNI everywhere, even on TikTok now, and I will put all of those links in the description below, along with a link to my Ko-fi where I post exclusive content for donors if you'd like to help support the channel in a more direct way. Until next time, be kind, do the work, continue supporting marginalized people, and keep creating. Will. What am I drinking? Water, unironically. So tasty. I didn't even get to talk about the Republican response to the outages. Like Governor Abbott saying how it was all the wind farms' fault and that this is why the Green New Deal legislation that hasn't even passed yet is bad for America. Or Tim Boyd, the mayor of Colorado City, Texas, telling people who wanted their electricity back on that they were lazy and looking for a handout, and that they deserved to perish for being weak and having no game plan and not, I don't know, like spontaneously manifesting a nuclear power plant in their backyard or something, I don't know. Or former Governor Rick Perry, who said that Texans would rather go without electricity and presumably freeze or dehydrate to death than allow federal regulation. Or Senator Ted Cruz, who rather than stay and raise funds or make calls or do literally anything constructive at all, f***ed off to Cancun. Yeah, you're right. Maybe just focus on the medieval part. Yeah.